On today's episode of Locked On Wilds, the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase roster has been revealed, and wait until you hear the route Kirill Kaprizov had to go to play in Mats Zuccarello's All-Star Game Showcase.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild. We are your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, and we are your team each and every day. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Contest runs through September 22nd. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we take a look at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase roster, and we'll get you ready for all of the details coming up in September. We'll also talk about Kirill Kaprizov, a circuitous route to go play in Mats Zuccarello's All-Star Showcase, and some award odds early for the 2024-2025 season, featuring a few Minnesota Wild players and John Hines in the top running for Coach of the Year. We'll talk about that as well. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. And we'll talk more about the meet and greet coming up on the 25th, less than a week away. But Alex Micheletti joining us for our Monday episode. And Alex, I can't wait to talk about this this Kirill Kaprizov flight situation. We're going to save that for segment 2, but I don't think people are ready for hearing just the route that he had to go on to be in that. But let's start with the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, because I have found the new heavy favorite for the all-name team for the Minnesota Wild for their prospect pool. And you look at this roster on the offensive side, all the usual suspects: Luke Toporowski, Hunter Haight, Matthew Sopp, Ryder Ritchie, Gavin Hain, Mason Zabeski, Riley Haight, Mikey Milne, Cody Dupuis, Felix Lacerte, Caden Bankier, Brad Merrick, Jack O'Brien, Pavel Novak, and Luke Lohheit are representing on offense. Defensively, Jack Pert, Bogdans Hodis, Jordan Torney, Carson Lambos, Kyle Masters, Stevie Leskovar, David Spacek, and Callum Parker. And goalies-wise, Kyle McClellan, Samuel Levi, Riley Mercer, and Chase Wutsky. Bogdans Hodis is my new official favorite name in the prospect pool, but some interesting names to keep an eye on here throughout the course of the showcase, which is in the middle of September. It is, I think, running the 14th through the 16th. And so should be fun. It's always a good just opportunity to see some of these prospects that the Wild have in their system.
Yeah, definitely. As we know, the Wild continue to grow a really fun, exciting prospect group, and so the hope is eventually there's spots for these guys. But it's fun to see all the talent that Judd Brackett and his crew are helping Bill Guerin accumulate.
Some of the other names that I am going to be intrigued to keep an eye on, Cody Dupuis, who looked pretty good in the development camp, is, I think, an intriguing one because he's not somebody that I think was high on the radar, but looks like somebody that
played for the Wild too.
Yeah, so. Looks like somebody who certainly has some good skills to bring to the table. Obviously, you've got like the Riley Heights of the world, who are the big names that we're keeping an eye on all the time. But another one too just because he has been through a lot. And so we're hopefully now getting a chance to see him kind of get back into the hockey side of things. Pavel Novak, who, he's battled some things over the last few seasons, but looks like he's finally now healthy and ready to try to cement his spot in this organization.
Yeah, when you can battle through that adversity, it's such a great story. So I'm so glad that he's just even able to play. It's that's a big deal. No matter what, if he never makes it, if he, I'm just so glad he gets to keep playing the sport he loves. So congrats to him for pushing through everything. Jack Pert too. I'm excited to see how he develops here now that he's done with college hockey and has turned pro. So definitely we'll be keeping an eye on to see how he does against these other teams' prospects.
Yeah, and the other names, Carson Lambos, Kyle Masters, we're very intrigued to see how that trio especially does in Iowa, because we look at it now, and ever since Zeev was drafted, Zeev Buium was drafted by the Wilds, that kind of resets the timeline for the defensive prospects with him taking the lead, because we've been pretty firm on it here on this show that once the Denver season is done, he's going to be making his way to the NHL roster pretty quickly after that. And so we turn our attention to who's next? Who's going to be the next player that sees that jump to the NHL level? And between Pert, Lambos, and Masters, it seems pretty likely that one of those three is one of the next to make that jump too.
Yeah, 100%, and they have to, right? I mean, they've been heavily invested, so that is the hope. Just with this decor and everything, it's just you don't like I said, we just don't know when prospect spots are going to be open, but that's what Bill Guerin has to figure out here and see if more spots can be opened up with trades, or this upcoming trade deadline is going to be very interesting. Just depending on where the team is at, if they're in a wild card spot, or if they're or if it's tanking off. Just this team and injuries, it seems to who knows what's gonna happen.
They always catch up. On the goalie side, obviously Samuel Levi is the big one that we're keeping an eye on, but I'm really intrigued by Chase Wutzke too. An 06 date of birth, which just makes me shake my head because I was a junior in high school in 06, and he's somebody who's been pegged as kind of a fast riser throughout all of his stops in hockey. And we talk about, it's pretty evident that Jesper is going to be the future on the NHL roster. There's a lot of time that is up for grabs in the AHL when Jesper does eventually make his way to the NHL. At this point, it seems likely that we're going to get Marc-André, Fleury, and Filip Gustavsson at the NHL level, which means Jesper will be in Iowa at least to start the season. But once he makes the jump, somebody is going to need to make those starts down in Iowa, and even at the Heartlanders level too. And so to have some guys that can potentially make those starts and lock those spots down is not something that the Wild had last season. And so nice to have a little organizational depth at the goalie position, because that's been sorely lacking over the last few seasons.
100%. And, this is Fleury's last year in the NHL. So, I mean, there's going to, after this upcoming season, there's going to be some even more shuffling. And who knows with Filip Gustavsson, they could, potentially still move him too. So, I mean, it's gonna change. And, as we've seen in the NHL too, I mean, there's been so much goalie movement recently.
Yeah.
And a lot of injuries too. I mean, a lot of teams went through 3 or 4 goalies. So you need that depth. I'm glad that both of the minor league affiliates right there in Iowa. They don't have to travel too far to St. Paul if there becomes goalie issues.
Which there will at some point this season. That's just how it works. There will be a need for somebody to come up and make some starts. And so, like you said, it's nice to have the farm clubs right there to be able to help out with that. So again, the prospect showcase is September 13th, 14th, and 15th. I've already talked with Jack Bushman of Locked On Blackhawks. We're working on a plan for coverage, so stay tuned, and we'll keep you up to date as to when and where, because the prospect showcase is in St. Louis, and so there's a pretty likely bet that I will be too. So stay tuned for that. When we come back, we're going to talk about Kirill Kaprizov and his harrowing journey to play in Mats Zuccarello's All-Star Showcase. We'll talk about the route that he went to get there and more as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Indeed. We are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Plus, listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just head to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We are your team each and every day. And we thank you for tuning in here to today's episode. For your second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On NHL podcast. We have the full lowdown on everything going on throughout the NHL. And as Alex noted, there has been some big news in the NHL over the last few days. So make sure to check out Locked On NHL to get the full lowdown on everything going on. Trades and players asking for trades, as in the case of Yaroslav Askarov. He wants out. And frankly, I don't blame him for that. Alex, I'm going to read you a tweet from Michael Russo. Listen to this. Wild story by IDAMV on Twitter about how Kirill Kaprizov will play in the Zuccarello All-Star Game on Saturday. And this tweet was on Thursday, so this has already happened. But Kirill Kaprizov can't simply fly into Norway without a special permit due to Russia's invasion into Ukraine. After much work behind the scenes, Kaprizov will fly from Moscow to Istanbul to Gothenburg, then helicopter to Lillehammer. Kaprizov got a Swedish visa when the Minnesota Wild played in the Global Series in Sweden last November. That visa is good for a year, so he's able to fly to Norway via Sweden. The story says Zuccarello's team has permission in writing that Kaprizov can fly into Norway this way. And it brings me to a couple of different points. But I guess the one is when you have a friendship like Kirill and Mats Zuccarello that they do, there is no obstacle. There is no obstacle to making this sort of thing happen. It's crazy to just think about the number of like detours that go into just making simply appearing in like an all-star type game happen. And we get a good example of that here with Kirill.
I
don't know if I could do the helicopter part. I really don't.
It's like a James Bond movie for Kirill Kaprizov. It's too bad he has to jump through all these hoops. I'm so glad that it is figured out. That he doesn't get caught. In a country and then is just stuck. So it's kind of convenient that he was able to get that visa from when the Wild had a game so overseas. So thank goodness for that. But it goes to show out the love of that Kirill has for Zuccarello, and that's why I talked about on the episode before that hopefully they play on a line together this season because they need Zuccarello to be a whole lot better. So we'll see, but just insane, right? It's like a movie, like I mentioned. Just all and to get on a helicopter of all things too, which is kind of nerve wracking, but I'm sure it's as safe as they can possibly make it.
The roster for the Zuccarello team. Zuccarello's team consisted of only players from the world's best ice hockey league, the NHL. Some of them are also amongst the biggest profiles in the league, as the website says, which I just threw into Google Translate. Zuccarello, Joel Eriksson Ek, Eric Brandstrom, Brock Faber, Jonas Brodin, Matt Boldy, old friend Kevin Fiala, Marcus Johansson, Fabian Zetterlund, Filip Gustavsson, Matthias Nyland, Emil Lilleberg, Carl Hagelin, and Kirill Kaprizov. And the EHL All-Star game or All-Star team is comprised of players throughout 10 different EHL clubs. And so, not only did we have Kirill Kaprizov, but you also had quite a few Wild players involved in this. And so, it's fun to see all the guys together ahead of the season. And I haven't heard anything to suggest that it didn't work out according to plan, but you always wonder about those kinds of things too, is like, well, what happens if something goes wrong? But by all accounts, it sounds like everything went just fine over the weekend.
Yeah, it's very, very, very nerve-wracking, right?
Not great. Before we break, we talked about it last week, and it's amazing how much can change in a week's time. Another tweet from Michael Russo, but also from Brad Schlossman, who's been on top of this the whole way. August 15th from Brad. Major League Hockey, remember, we talked about last week, and not being sure what to expect from this entity. Major League Hockey, which says it is a $1 billion startup 3x3 league, posted it's charging players $375 to try out. Within days, it changed the price and said the money would be refunded, then canceled the tryouts altogether. And Russo quote tweets it and says, after postponing tryouts till late October, I'm told a decision will be made this weekend whether or not to postpone the launch of the new Major League Hockey 3-on-3 league from November to October 2025. It sounds like there's a great chance of that due to a medical setback with the CEO. An official says it would still open business offices in at least 16 locations, including the Twin Cities. And I keep going back, although somebody replied and said that they actually cited us in saying that they heard that the reporter Brad called 600 arenas in Minnesota that could hold a particular amount of people, and none of them had any contracts for the team there or heard of this league. Russo responds and says they were to play at Aldridge Arena. And so the plot thickens. But again, I go back to Schlossman's reporting in saying that he called every arena. None of them had any idea of this this league existing. So
yeah, Brad's been all over this. He's
put me still in team skeptical, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with this again.
Yeah, the NHL would never do something like that where you have to pay the league to try out. That's just when you heard that lets you know there's money issues. Is this even real? So that is very, very sketchy.
As the kids say, it's sus. It's very sus. So we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll see what happens as Major League Hockey continues to try to materialize into something. When we come back, we will finish by taking a look at some early odds for different awards throughout the NHL. A couple of wild players factoring into the equation. That is on the way as we finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild, I should say, is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. A couple of reminders for you. You can enter into the Locked on Wild sweepstakes for your chance to win 2 tickets to opening night against the Columbus Blue Jackets. All you have to do is show proof that you subscribe to Locked on Wild on YouTube. Just send us a snapshot and include your name in the email, and we will get you entered in to the sweepstakes. We'll draw the winner in early October, so you still have plenty of time to get entered as we try to get Locked on Wild to 3K by opening day. Full contest rules can be found in the description of this episode. And then on Sunday, 12 to 3 at Zamboni's on 7th, we will be having a live show and meet and greet. Get a chance to say hello to all of the wonderful listeners of Locked on Wild. We'll be doing a live show, and you can come out and hang out, just have a good time. And for those that are not able to make it, we will also be having the live show still in this capacity. So you can either show up in person, or you can just hang out here in the comment section. We'll be answering your questions. Alexis Pearson will be joining us. State of Hoppy will be joining us. Alex, you'll be joining us. And Pat will be joining us as well. Should be a lot of fun. Going to be a great time. Again, Zamboni's on 7th, 12 to 3 on Sunday, the 25th. Be there or be here. But either way, just mark it down. Jot it down on your calendars. It's going to be a great time, and we're looking forward to it. Just like we're looking forward to the potential for Kirill Kaprizov to come away with some hardware this season. As Michael Russo notes, he's got the 4th best odds to win the Rocket Richard Trophy, according to various sites online. And so not only do you have Kirill Kaprizov with the 4th best odds, John Hines has vaulted up the leaderboard in the Jack Adams voting. He is currently 15 to 1 to win the Jack Adams, which puts him behind Sheldon Keefe Andrew Brunette, Craig Berube, Travis Green, Chris Knobloch. He's tied with Andre Tourney, John Cooper, and Spencer Carberry in Washington. So you've got that going on. You've got Kirill Kaprizov. You also have a couple of wild players on the board for Calder. Jesper Wallstedt is 35-1 to win the Calder Trophy. Zeev Buium on the board at 50-1. And so of those players, who do you think is most likely to bring home their award? Kirill, John Hines, Zeev Buium, or Jesper Wallstedt?
Oh man, that is Kirill probably. I mean,
it has to be.
Yeah, that has to be the easiest out of all those. I mean, Hines. I mean, if the Wild make the playoffs with just just getting him in the playoffs, but I just don't see it for Hines. But Kirill, he's gonna be motivated. So I think he's the logical choice out of that group.
Here's kind of where my head goes with this is Kaprizov is going to be coming into the season healthy, which is something that he didn't get a chance to do last year.
Right.
And look at how he did. There was a slow start, but around the Sweden games was when he started to kind of put everything together, and he still nearly had 100-point season. If you take that over 82 games, the potential to continue his work with Joel Eriksson Ek and Matt Boldy, I think he's the runaway here because John Hines, his stake in the Jack Adams voting depends entirely on how the team does, which largely means how Kirill does.
Right.
And for the Calder, Zeev, as we've talked about, he's going to get a handful of games at the end of the season, depending on how long Denver's season goes.
He shouldn't even be out.
Yeah, so that's going to take him out of the running there. And then Jesper, as we get closer to the start of the season and we continue to have Filip Gustavsson and Marc-André Fleury on the roster,
Jesper's not going to play enough games unless Gustavsson gets traded. So he's another guy that that's throwing away your money and just not it's not going to happen for this upcoming season unless barring a trade. So
hot take, one of those two, if not both, will be a finalist next season.
No doubt. Yeah. 100%.
So I guess I should call that a lukewarm take because it's not really going out on a big limb because they're both supremely talented. And the expectation is that next year they will be on the roster pretty much the entire season, if not the whole season. It's just this year, there's a lot in front of them that has to be sorted out before there is consistent playing time available to be able to factor into the voting. In this case.
One more thing on Kirill, Ek has to be a center the entire season. I just think you cannot. Yeah, you have to have Ek because he does so much for Kirill out there and best face-off guy on the team. So just if Kirill's gonna have the production that he wants, he has to be with Ek the entire year.
Well, and the point that I continue to make, and this is one that I don't know, it doesn't feel like it's been talked about enough. Joel Eriksson Ek has earned it. You want to talk about trying to figure out who the number one center on this team is. He's earned it. And so I think you're exactly right. Like you got to just put particular players together as combinations. And I think unless Mats Zuccarello just cannot do it at the start of the season, then maybe you look at trying to, pair people up to help get people going. But that combination was too good down the stretch. Too good to not at least start the season with and give them an opportunity to just continue to do the heavy lifting.
Well, and they're going on that long road trip, so why would you not at least start that out with how with how tough the schedule is, at the beginning of the year here.
It would be what I would do if I was head coach, but I clearly, that's why I'm sitting here and not running an NHL team. But we'll see what happens. We continue to get closer to the start of the season, which is just great. I can't wait for it to get started because there's so much in the air right now that we're not going to know until the rosters get going, and it's either that or it's just continued Patrick Laine trade wins. And at this point,
it continues with the Wild. But
at this point, what do you say that hasn't already been said?
Right.
And so, I mean, we'll keep an eye on it, but I'm very much in the mode now where if Laine does get traded here, I'll react to it after it happens.
Yeah.
Because we know there's a lot of work that has to go into making that happen, and it just seems like too big of an obstacle.
Yeah, like one of your favorite phrases, the math is not mathing. So
yeah, exactly. Like let's just wait and see what happens. But that'll do it for today's episode. Make sure to join us tonight at 8 p.m. for the live show. Denny will be joining us at 8. He's got some thoughts on the roster and plenty of others to get to here this evening. So 8 p.m. for the live show tonight, and we will talk to you then. But make sure to subscribe to Locked On Wild if you haven't already on YouTube or your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Locked On Wild brings you new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.